Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us. I'm going to be speaking today about the adolescent literacy crisis and specifically the IES guide in action, which is really some great research on what works for answering this crisis. I'm Shelley Bell Smith. I am an engagement manager with Mass Insight Education and Research. And today we're going to just look at some of the evidence on how to improve the reading skills of struggling readers. And so I mentioned earlier research. Obviously, we have lots of research, but more importantly, we have evidence of what works. And we're going to specifically look at 2 literacy strategies that can be implemented in schools. Doing this currently with some of the schools that I work with in Philadelphia, and I'll also be talking about class-wide intervention models and how we can use these to help students. So if you're not familiar with Mass Insight, we're a national nonprofit, and you can see by the logos of different states and districts across the country that we work across the nation and many capacities. I currently work with the Pennsylvania Department of Education and have worked in Philadelphia for the past 4 years. And my background is as a high school English teacher, was an elementary and middle school administrator, a district administrator, and continue to be a dyslexia and literacy advocate. And like I mentioned, I've been working in Pennsylvania, specifically Philadelphia, with low performing schools. And so if you're not familiar with this guide, I would encourage you to go look it up and bookmark it because it has so much evidence for what works. And when this came out in March of 2022, I was in love with it. I just really walked around trying to tell everybody to go read it. And lots of really respected researchers wrote this. Chief among them is Dr. Sharon Vaughn. She's at the Meadows Center for Preventing Educational Risk, University of Texas in Austin. And so not only does it have recommendations, but it has resources, which are so valuable. And so it really summarizes like 4 main recommendations for improving struggling readers, grades 4 through 9. And I'm going to talk about the top 2, and I'll tell you very briefly why. Number 1, very strong evidence, and they, to me, have the most impact for 4 through 9 because we already are doing much of recommendation 3 with comprehension strategies in those grades. So 1 and 2 to me are the most powerful. So just jumping into it, the first recommendation is to improve students' decoding, and really just, a lot of people don't want to talk about decoding, but we're increasingly seeing information and research about how important it is. And so this actually just came out last month. And so what we are looking at here with this decoding threshold is if you only can decode a certain percentage of words, then you're never going to be able to really read well and comprehend well. And so this is a brand new report. Certainly you can look it up. But to me, Anita Archer, who, in the literacy world is, rock star, superstar, sums it up really well, who says there's no comprehension strategy powerful enough to compensate if a student cannot read the words. And I would just encourage everyone to have that quote hanging somewhere in their school, because it's just a really powerful reminder. All of that work with comprehension means nothing if students can't decode the words. So I'm not going to read this, but really want to hit the high point of decoding for students in grades 4 through 9 looks different than it does in the early grades. And this is really because the recommendation involves morphology, and morphology, is breaking it down to the smallest meaningful unit. So that could be a prefix, a suffix, a root or a base word. And this is really powerful because about half of the words in English have more than one morpheme. And so when we teach students a morphological approach, then it is more effective for them to tackle more words, and more effective, especially in the subject areas. And this is really important for our students who are learning English, and those with language-based learning disabilities, because it helps them unpack these very complex words, which are very often in textbooks and content areas. And so, here's some of the things that start happening as students get past fourth and fifth grade, is that there's no standards that specifically address decoding. And so people just kind of pretend that students can decode. And part of this is because, and I will include myself, I was not trained to teach decoding. And so I didn't know how to teach decoding to my 10th, 11th, and 12th graders. And so we come up into this place where it's not even in the standards. Teachers don't necessarily know how to do it. It's really hard to do reading intervention in the upper grades because of scheduling. And it's also just the content is very demanding. I tell people all the time, I was trained to teach Shakespeare, but I was not trained to teach reading. And then I think the other thing that is important is, we have that learning to read and reading to learn shift. And students, whether they can read or not, are being taught as if they can decode. And then finally, and I just want to point out, you'll see this especially true with students with IEPs, because teachers have been taught to pick a grade level goal, and foundational skills are often not included for that very reason, even though students desperately need those skills. So why decoding again is, if you're struggling to decode words, that is where all of your cognitive capacity is. Your brain is struggling to decode words. And so by the time you get to the end of the sentence, you don't really know what you've read. And then also, when you can't decode well, it really does limit all of that wide reading knowledge that you would have otherwise gained through background knowledge from reading a lot, or vocabulary, or learning how to pick out context clues. And then finally, if you've ever been in a classroom with struggling readers, sometimes this leads to problems just in student classroom behavior, because if you're going to ask a student to read aloud, some of those students are going to cause a problem just to avoid being identified as a struggling reader. And so, certainly this is not an easy proposition, because a lot of students aren't wanting to be identified as a struggling reader. And so they're going to resist being taught these skills because they don't want to admit that they don't have them. And it's also harder, I think, to make this appealing and interesting to older students. I think finally, we have to figure out how to get teachers the skills to do this, because many people, myself included, wanted to teach students how to read. We just didn't know how. And again, we've just skipped over this and assumed for so long. So this IES guide for morphology is a really great way to tackle decoding for our older students. And so we actually see so many benefits for morphology, not only in spelling words, correctly, but also just taking a word that they've never seen before and being able to break it apart into the parts that they know and figure it out. And so lots of advantages. And so here's just an example. When you know that the root tele means far, then we can start to make sense of words like these, like telegram, writing that goes far, telegraph, a machine that sends messages far, a telescope is to see far, see something far away. And so it not only helps students decode, but understand the words. Here's another one, auto, when we know that that means self. You can understand that autograph is, self-writing. It's someone's signature. Autobiography, a self-written story, autopilot, autofocus, automatic. And even in other areas, social studies, science, that teachers can also use this morphology to help students figure out content specific words. And we have schools where they've got a morphology wall, and it really just helps students see the connection across disciplines. So recommendation 2 is providing purposeful fluency building activities. And so this could be repeated reading, it could be silent reading, some partner reading, some just different formats for fluency building. And why fluency matters is fluency really involves reading accurately, being able to identify the word and then do it at a rate that is sufficient, and then the prosody where it's got the phrasing and the intonation. And so when we have fluency, we are reading at a rate and expression that indicates that we are making meaning of it. And so lots of work has been done, obviously, over the years with fluency. And I pulled something out from 1998 where we're really just getting enough practice to achieve fluency. So that's something that's been out there for quite a while. Some researchers that have really talked about fluency and its role, and I have highlighted Dr. Matt Burns because since the pandemic, he has really been kind of spreading this gospel of fluency for students as a way to make up for learning loss during the pandemic. And so that is, some of the work that I have been doing is really based on his, even though I love all of these researchers. And so Matt Burns really popularized this idea, and there's others, of the need for class-wide interventions. And so when you have half or more of your class needing a skill, then it's really not a good use of our time to try to teach something in a tier 2 or tier 3 space. And so we really need to be doing this with all students in our tier 1 space. This is something that could be used with any curriculum. It's a supplement. It doesn't take its place. And it generally helps most students, even though the fluency intervention that I'm going to be talking to you about today doesn't fix severe reading problems by any means. So what Matt Burns has advocated for is 15 to 20 minutes a day, which is something that is doable in a lot of classroom settings. So you will see, this is a STAR report from a school that I've worked with, and you can see, the red is the intensive, the orange is the strategic, own watch is light blue, and at or above. And what I did was just draw a line down the middle. And so you can see whether, you know, greater than 50% or more needs intervention. And so, you know, most of the classes in this school, it would be indicated for. And so if that was the case, then you could take the same star data. You could put students in the order of, and this was like words read correctly, this one, but it also works for, you know, whatever measure that you're doing. And what we do is cut it in half, and then we pair the lowest student in this group with the lowest student in the top group. And so it's just pairing students up with the idea of we need a stronger reader and a weaker reader. And, you know, obviously, because we're talking about students in upper elementary and middle school, we're going to have to do some arranging sometimes because personalities are a consideration when working with older students, but that's generally the premise. And this is how it works. You know, we have some passages at the lower students level. The stronger reader reads aloud for 5 minutes. The weaker reader reads that same text to repeat for 5 minutes. Then they're going to start reading new text. And after each paragraph, the stronger reader is going to, you know, summarize what was just read. And then for the second 5 minutes, the weaker reader will continue and summarizing. And so, and paragraph shrinking is what it's called when we're summarizing. And you see the hands there, and you know, we teach students to say the main idea in 10 words or less, the who or the what. And so that's like a very primitive kind of description of what this is. But, you know, I would encourage you, if you're interested in that, you know, Dr. Burns' work is online, free, and so happy to talk to you about implementing, you know, some kind of fluency at your school. And because I have been doing this with some of the CSI schools that I work with in Philadelphia, and we've seen some success. And we are continuing to do this. You know, this district has a brand new ELA curricula. So we are, you know, working on now moving this fluency intervention to science and social studies classes. So it really is very flexible and can work in a variety of areas. And this really comes from, you know, having success with fluency reading last year. They didn't want to give it up. So it is something that I feel like could work in a variety of places and classrooms. So in the end, you know, these two strategies are great, but they're not the answer to getting us where we need to be to address the adolescent literacy crisis. And what we really want are, you know, more systemic answers and solutions because this is a really big and far-reaching problem, and so it's not going to be fixed easily. However, sometimes if we can implement a couple of great strategies, that gets us moving in the right direction for a larger solution. So, you know, would be happy to have a discussion with you and your team about how to improve your adolescent literacy program. Always excited to talk to people to learn about what you're doing that's working so that I can learn from it as well. Here is my information. And be happy for you to email me, call me. You know, my goal is always to just help students read because it is just the civil rights issue of our time. And I will also throw out that we do 1 hour pro bono sessions, and would love to connect you with people in our organization, even if it's not me. So if we have any questions, I would be happy to answer those. Yeah, looks like there aren't any in the Q&A. Wonderful. All right. Thank you so much for attending. I hope to talk to you soon.